Hello everybody and welcome back to the Young Fan Podcast. Again, this is actually the start of the podcast. The podcast will be coming in just a few moments. The second week, of course, of the ranking show. You don't want to miss that. It's an absolute cracker of a podcast. Before then though, I just have to quickly mention a few things. I did mention at the end of the podcast, but I just wanted to make sure that obviously some people might not get to the end of the podcast. I wanted to say it now. We're on the road to 100 subscribers before the end of the year. You're probably thinking, Jack, what do I get out of that? When I hit that subscribe button, what do I get out of that? And I'll tell you. We will be bringing live content to the podcast. We'll be doing live match reactions, live match previews, live match debates of footballing debates. The world of football will be coming back live. We can interact with each other. We're even going to be doing live watch-alongs of the game. The game's going to be in front of me. I'm going to react to it live as the minutes of the games go down. You do not want to miss it. All you've got to do is subscribe to the podcast before the end of the year. So if you do it now, it gets out of the way. You'll never miss an episode of the podcast if you notify by hitting the notification bell and subscribing as well. We're on a fantastic journey on the podcast. Hopefully you're enjoying it, because I certainly am. And yes, also one last thing, really sorry before interrupting you before we start on the podcast, but it is the start of November. It's the first day of November. I did mention it a few episodes ago. I did say that we're going to be supporting a good friend of mine who is raising money for the Movember charity. That's Josh. I'll leave his donation link below. He's got a target of £50. He's already on a £45 raise. So let's get him to that £50 donation target before the end of November. That'd be fantastic. We're supporting you, Josh, and hopefully he can hit that target. I'm sure he will. He's already on 45. There's only 5 away, and we haven't even. We've just started November. But anyway, thank you very much for listening to this, and enjoy the podcast. Hello everybody and welcome back to the Young Fan Podcast. We're back in the normal podcast surroundings. It's a late Sunday night. I forgot the day of the week. It's a late Sunday night. Back where we have been since we started the podcast. Where it normally is, of course. We've been away. I've been away. We haven't been away. I've been away, and I moved briefly out, and that's to hold the microphone, and it wasn't ideal surroundings, but we're back where we're meant to be in the normal podcast surroundings, and we're going to crack straight on with another episode of the ranking show. Now, we did the ranking show last week, of course. We did all the rankings from the start of the season up until then. We since then have played 2 games in which we will now be ranking the players off of that same scale, and they'll be seeing which players are moving up and which players are moving down over the last week, including the last few games that we've just played, which of course were Charlton and Fleetwood, both of which we lost 2-0, which is why I feel like it's going to be a very interesting ranking show, because I can tell you something right now. Every single player in this week's rankings, there is no player that's actually stayed in the same place. Now, I don't know whether it will be on the screen already. I think it will be, but Sean Clare, as you can see, is in number 10. Now, last week he was in number 9. He's dropped down 1 place from last week. And that's basically how the system's going to work as well. So based on the last 2 games and their performance in those 2 games, that will then dictate where they are in the new rankings, and how obviously their ranking will change throughout the season. That's how the ranking shows work. I did explain it in the last episode of the podcast, so if you want me to go into more detail of how it works, it's very simple. It's nothing too complicated. I definitely recommend checking out the first one, because then you can actually remind yourself on what the actual rankings already are. I'm going to whisper them anyway though, just to make sure. So last week, in number 10, we had Alex Gorman. Sean Clare was in number 9, like I just said. Sykes was in number 7. Atkinson was in number 6. Atkinson was in number 7. Moore was in number 6. Adju was in number 5. Long was number 4. Taylor was number 3. Henry was number 2, and Anthony Ford was number 1. That was last week's ranking. We'll then now be doing the new set of rankings based on the last 2 games as well. Now, I didn't actually do a player ratings for the last game. I'm recording this on Sunday, but this will probably be coming out on Monday. Most of the ranking show episodes will be coming out on Monday. That's the plan anyway. So I think Monday will be the day that happens. But I didn't actually do a player ratings for the game against Fleetwood, one, because I wanted to get out as quickly as possible. I knew we had a ranking show coming up, and also because, I basically wanted to get it out as quickly as possible so you could get my match reaction, and also thanks for the support on that match reaction as well. It was very, very good. Remember, we're also on a road to 100 subscribers before the end of 2020 and before the start of 2021. With that, we'll be bringing live content, including live watch-alongs, live match reactions, live match previews, all of that good stuff. Basically, all you're getting now, plus live content as well. Obviously, you won't be getting two live. Obviously, you won't be getting two match previews. Obviously, we'll have a live one, and obviously, you won't be getting two match reactions. We'll have one live one as well. But obviously, they'll be staying on the podcast YouTube channel, so you can go back and watch it anytime as well. So if you're not there for the live one, do not worry about that. It will be the same concept. It'll just be on it. It'll just be live if you would like to be here live, and we can interact with each other. That's how it's going to work. That's what the plan is for the podcast going forward. I'm very, very excited for it. If you're excited for it as well, subscribe, leave a like on the episode of the podcast. Thank you very much for the continued support on that. So anyway, let's stop rambling on. We're 4 minutes in. We haven't even cracked on yet with the ranking show, other than obviously you know who is in number 10, and that is of course Sean Clare. Reason why he's dropped down, I think he did okay in both games, but definitely okay going forward. Defensively, I still am a little bit concerned by Sean Clare. I think defensively, he's still learning that right back role. I think he does he does worry me when on that one-on-one situation when he's in that defensive area. I think he looks really good going forward. Really, really powerful going forward, but defensively he is a worry, to be honest with you. Which is obviously a really, really important part of the right back position, and obviously we need him to sort that out and feel more comfortable, I guess, with that right back position as quickly as possible. I think that's the important thing. When you're a right back, it's great to have that attacking threat, but if you can't defend, it's what's going to cause problems. In the Premier League or in the higher leagues, I guess you could probably get away with being being an attacking right back. I think that that could work. But for Oxford United in League One, it tends to be much more physical, which obviously can cause problems for teams. And when you have a more physical side coming against you, Sean Clare, does struggle a little bit. Not because he's weak, but because defensively he is a little bit weak, I'd say. But not weak as in strength. I mean weak as in ability defensively. That's why he's dropped down one place. I don't think he had a great game in either one of them, but that is because we conceded 2 goals, and defensively he looked a little bit shaky, I'd say. But I think going forward he looked good. I think there's aspects of a good thing in Sean Clare. I just maybe think, could we give him a game in a more attacking role in midfield? But then that's where he played for Hearts, obviously, before he came to Oxford United in the summer. But obviously we've got quite a few midfielders. We've got a lot of midfielders, I'd say, at the club. Brannigan obviously out, and he'll probably come back in. We definitely will come back into this team when he's fit. Anthony Ford's been doing really well, as you can probably tell by if you watch the games or if you watch the ranking show. I gave him number 1 last week, so he is doing well, and I think he is probably the most impressive player I'd seen so far this season, and he's not got the best ability, I'd say. I just think on performance he has done the best. So would he come in instead of Ford? I wouldn't agree with that, and you're not going to take a Gorman or a Kelly, certainly not a Gorman out of the side, because we know how important Gorman is to this Oxford United side. So maybe you could do a defensive midfield role, but if he can't defend at right back, I do not want to see him in a defensive midfield role or anything like that, sort of doing the Gorman sweeping role from the centre-backs. I do not want to see that in somebody that I don't feel comfortable defending, but that's just me. So Clare obviously was in number 9 last week. He's dropped down to number 10, but he's still in the top 10, of course. We've got players, and I can read the players that aren't in the top 10. Messinio, Atkinson, Ruffles, Kelly, Brannigan, Winnell, Cooper, and Eastwood, all not in the top 10, obviously, and Stevens as well. But all those players, some top quality players there, obviously not in the top 10 this week or actually last week. There has been a new entry, and if you were very careful there in who I read out, there is obviously a player that has dropped out. But yeah, if Kelly starts playing really, really well, he can come in. When Brannigan's fit, he'll be a very, very important player for Oxford. He probably will end up in the top 10 this season when Cooper starts performing as well. So to be in the top 10, it is a big achievement, because there are players you are leaving out. But anyway, we'll stop rambling. Anyway, at number 9, I've gone with Mark Sykes. He's also gone down from last week as well, of course, mainly because I think he had a decent average game against Charlton and didn't play against Fleetwood. So I don't think we can judge him too much. I don't think it's enough to drop him out of the top 10 completely, and I still think he did okay against Charlton. I thought he got on the ball quite a lot. I think he looked pretty decent when he did get on the ball, but that's only when we have the spells of football. We mentioned it in the match previews and in the match reaction as well. He looks good, and I guess everyone looks good when we've got the ball, and when we've got that spell of domination. When we haven't got the ball, Obviously, when you're an attacking player like Mark Sykes, or a midfielder or a winger, wherever he plays or has played this season, it is important, obviously, that he can, continue that can obviously keep hold of the ball and can make things happen for Oxford. Has he made things happen? Has he looked like a player that's going to, change the game? I don't think he has this season, but that can still come with Mark Sykes. He's dropped down number 1. He is in number 9 this week. Number 8 is Dan Adjei. Now, didn't start against Fleetwood, didn't start against Charlton. Obviously, he's dropped down 3 places from last week. He is obviously now in 8, which means he was in number 4 last week. The reason why he's in number 4 last week, obviously, we're judging that on the whole season. I think he'd had a really good start to the season. I think when he'd come on in games, I think he'd done well, but he'd actually started quite a few games in that sort of wing area, and I think he looked really good. He got a goal in there as well. He looked quite powerful. He looked like he was a player that could impact the game, Dan Adjei, but he hasn't played in those last 2 games. He's been used as an impact sub. Has he made much of an impact? I don't personally think he does, but obviously this is very opinionated. Dan Adjei's dropped down 4 places. It's quite a big drop down, but you have to remember when he hasn't started for 2 games, you're not going to be staying where you are. You're not going to be, going up if you haven't started games, unless you come off the bench and, change games, which I don't think Adjei does. I don't think he'll agree. I don't think he'll think otherwise. I think, we can be pretty solid and pretty certain to any of us. Adjei hasn't changed the game when he's come off the bench against Fleetwood and Charlton. And he had quite a lot of game time against Charlton when he came off the bench. And he didn't really impact the game too much, or I'd say not much at all. And then obviously against Fleetwood, he didn't really touch the ball and wasn't really an impact in that game either. So he's dropped down 4 places. Dan Adjei, you are in number 8 this week on the ranking show. So in number 7, we've got a new entry. A new entry, wasn't in it last week. He could have been in it last week. He got a really nice goal against MK Dons, which turned out to be the match-winning goal. But it's not going to be that. He's not. He is in the top 10 this week, which is pretty impressive. Only playing 2 games so far for Oxford United, and he's in number 7th, and that is Shodipo. A new entry this week, and he's straight into number 7, and that is a big achievement for somebody, like I said, that hasn't really been at Oxford United for too long. To get straight into that top 7 or into top 10 and be in 7th is a great achievement and a really good showing of what Shodipo's done. I think he had a really good game against MK Dons. Obviously, that isn't really taking it into consideration. I think he looked lively at times against Charlton and lively at times against Fleetwood. I think he did look like the bright spark in both of those games going forward, I'd say. He looks like a really decent player. He got really, he's a very quick player. He's a really nippy player with lots of pace, lots of dribbling attributes as well. He looks really good going forward. He looks like he's going to cause a lot of problems, Shodipo, offensively. And yeah, I think we've got a really good players on our hands at Oxford United on loan from QPR. Obviously, we've got to get him more into the game, and I think like I said, he was the bright spark against Fleetwood. I think if you can take one thing out of the game against Fleetwood and Charlton, I think Shodipo looked pretty lively. So yeah, Shodipo's in number 7. I think he's done pretty well. There's more to come from him, but I think there's more to come from every single one of the players, even the player that's in number 1 and the players obviously that aren't even in the top 10. I think every player isn't playing at their best. We're bottom of the league in League One with doing a ranking show with 2 defeats is very difficult, but I think every player in the top 10 is good, but not good enough. I think there's a big improvement needed going into next week and as the season unfolds as well. But that's for every player, and that's for the team. The team as a collective as well. So Shodipo, you're in number 7. Congratulations to you, sir. In number 6, we've gone with Matty Taylor. He's down 3 places from last week as well, so not as big as 4 places. Dan Adjei was also 3 places as well. So yeah, equally so far the biggest decrease in position in the ranking show today. Coming down to number 6, of course, if my maths is correct. Quick maths, that's 3rd to 6th. That is 3 places. 3rd last week. 3rd best, obviously, as I'm saying, 3rd best so far this season. He's number 6 after his 2 games as well. I just don't think he's really impacted the games a lot. I mean, he won the penalty yesterday against Fleetwood. I thought he looked okay. I thought he won the penalty quite well. Was it a penalty? Was it not a penalty? In my eyes, I think it was a penalty, but I'm biased and I'm not a United supporter. I want a penalty. We missed it anyway, so it doesn't really make a difference. But I think it was a penalty, and Matty Taylor did well to get onto the end of it and get brought down by the defender and get himself in the position to be brought down to win the penalty. But other than that, he didn't do ever so much against against Charlton. I think he had one opportunity in there that was probably a Matty Taylor opportunity, which you could maybe argue that was one he could bury. But obviously, like again against Fleetwood, his really only look on the game was probably winning the penalty. And other than that, he didn't really have too much of an impact on the game at all. So yeah, Taylor is dropping down places this week. Anyway, let's move on to number 5th, and that is Elliot Moore. He's actually the player that's, other than Shadipo, who was in the rankings last week, has actually moved up a place this week from number 6 to number 5, and that is Elliot Moore, like I just said. So Elliot Moore is in number 5th, and I think number 5, number 5, and I think the reason behind that is probably the fact that he's been very, very solid defensively. He's really given Oxford United that real, defensive stability that I really don't think has been stable enough, I think I'd say, because, you look at the goals we've conceded defensively, that is our weak area, I'd say, and hence why we've got a lot of goals this season, hence why we're rock bottom of the league. But Elliot Moore's, I think a lot of people have seen, pointing fingers at the defence, but actually when you look at Elliot Moore during the game, he hasn't really done anything wrong during the games. I don't think Elliot Moore, there's been one time in the games, at the start of, through the season, and especially in these last two games against Fleetwood and Charlton, I just think he looks very, very solid defensively. And I think the centre-backs really have looked defensive, but we'll come on to that in a minute. We'll come on to that when we've spoken about the other centre-back that is in the rankings this week. Not Rob Atkinson, he's not in the ranks this week. Spoiler, he's not going to be featured in the ranking show this week. He has dropped out. He is the only player that has dropped out this week. But his partner, Elliot Moore, he's in number 5 because I think he has just done a really good job defensively. You have to remember as well, he's had to change his role and had to change his side due to the departure of Rob Dickie and Atkinson having to come in. I just think he has done very, very well. I've been impressed with Moore. We conceded goals, we're bottom of the league, but I think still, when you look at the performance on individual, Moore has done a really good job defensively. I don't think there's one thing really that Moore has done wrong defensively. I still think with the height and the strength of Moore, I think he could be winning a bit more aerially, and I think that's the problem when we're sort of defending it. I do mention it too many times about set pieces and corners, which are the same thing, but I mean free kicks, like I say, in the box and corners. I do think defensively we do look like panicking when trying to defend them, and that is probably I guess a critique on the defence and certainly the centre halves there. And I do think when we're trying to attack a corner and attack a free kick, I do think maybe with the height of the centre backs and specifically Elliot Moore, I do think maybe we could offer something a little bit better going forward. But we're looking at defensive. We're not. Let's not get too over the top here. Let's concentrate on defending before we worry about attacking using defenders. So I think Elliot Moore has got to stay in the top 10. I think he's in number 5. He's moved up, I'd say. I think he's done a really, really good job defensively. I think it is more the fullbacks in the defensive area that are causing us problems this season. Let's move on to number 4 then. James Henry, of course, captain in both games against Charlton and against Fleetwood, but also the player that missed the penalty in the game against Fleetwood, a player that you normally rely on so much when it comes to set pieces. I mean, he does take corners every now and again, but I mean, definitely from the penalty spot, you do sort of fancy him when it comes to a penalty, and unfortunately, he didn't fancy himself, to be honest with you, because it was a poor penalty, and it was a penalty that probably could have changed the game for Oxford United. It probably could have changed the look on the game. It probably wouldn't have ended like it was. Well, we certainly wouldn't, because obviously we would have got a goal in there. Whether that would have changed the game and we'd have gone on to win it, or it would have been 2-1, either way. But I think Matty Taylor. I think James Henry. I think he's down 2 places this week. I think he started the season very well. I think he was very, very good. Hence why he was obviously second in the first week, but he's in number 4 because if you're judging it off those 2 performances, he didn't do a lot against Charlton, and he missed a penalty that could have changed the game, I'd say, against Fleetwood. So that's very frustrating. I think he did lose a little bit of confidence against Fleetwood, because when you miss a penalty, you've got that responsibility being a captain anyway. When you miss a penalty like that, it's difficult. I didn't have a great feeling. I'm not going to lie. I know it's easy for me to say now we've already missed it, but I didn't have a great feeling when he stood up. There was something telling me that this season has already been awful, and how can we sit here and say we deserve from the game if we can't take a penalty? It was a lifeline. Someone said it in the comments for the match reaction. A penalty is a lifeline in the situation we're in right now as a football club, and if we can't take penalties and take opportunities like that, it is so frustrating. And like I said, you can normally rely so much on James Henry, but unfortunately for him, unfortunately for Oxford, it just wasn't to be. So he misses a penalty. He drops down 2 places, not just because of the penalty. I just don't think he's impacted the game too much after that. but I do think he's definitely got to be in the top 4. He has been a good player. We can't forget the performances before these last 2 games, but on those last 2 games, he has dropped 2 places from last week on the ranking show. Anyway, in number 3, third in the top 10, and it is a player that was number 1 in the first week, and that is Anthony Ford. I gave him a lot of credit. I've actually been very, very, very impressed with Anthony Ford. I've been really, really impressed, and I actually think he's sort of relit and sort of re-erected his career at Oxford United. I'd say from last season. I think last season he was sort of troubled with a few injuries and didn't impact games. I was a little bit worried about what his future was, really. Anthony Ford, was he a right back that he was trying to be told that he was, maybe that could play? Is he a better right back than Sean Clare? That's a question for you to answer. I have my opinion on it. In my opinion, I don't know. I didn't really fancy Anthony Ford as a right back, but then I don't really fancy Sean Clare as a right back at the moment. But there's a lot of development time that he can improve that. Is he a wide player? Has he got that blitzer in place out on the width and the flanks? I don't think he does. But what he does have in that midfield is a great passing range and a really good dribbling ability. So that's why he was number 1, but he's dropped down 2 places this week. He's in third. Hasn't impacted the games as much, but again, I'm saying that for a lot of players because we've lost 2-0 in both of them. We haven't scored a goal. We've conceded 4 out of the last 2 games. So it is difficult, and it is a difficult one to take. But ultimately, when you're first, you've got to stay first. Who's been the best players this week? I don't think he's been awful. Otherwise, he could have dropped lower. I don't think he has been. I think he's been solid. He hasn't done anything wrong, but he just hasn't impacted the game as well as we know he can, and how well he has done throughout the season this season. Anyway, let's move on to number 2. Anthony Ford, in number 3, third in the top 10. It's keeping his place in that top 3 in the second week of the ranking show. Moving on to second, a player that I've given a lot of credit, just probably as much as Anthony Ford, and that is obviously Sam Long, a player that has actually gone up 2 places last week, the biggest jump other than Shadipo, who wasn't in it, like I've said, but Sam Long, 2 places from last week, he's in second, Sam Long, and I just think that's because he just didn't do anything wrong, and he was very, very solid defensively, and we've got to give Sam Long a lot of credit. I also wanted to say as well, I did remember to say, I didn't actually write it down, but I did mean to say this, I think he spoke really well after the game. What I mean by that is he did an interview for Oxford United after the game, sort of reflecting on that Fleetwood defeat, and I think he spoke really well. He sort of spoke in the same words, I think, and it's not just me, many fans, I was listening to it after the game as well, lots of fans' reactions, and it was the same as all fans really, but Sam Long sort of, I guess, echoed what we'd said. Obviously he didn't even hear it first, we couldn't really echo it, but he definitely can see the situation as the same as we can, which is, I guess, a good thing, but can we turn that sort of that explanation into results on the pitch? Only we can decide that. Well, the players can, we can't. The players can only change that. And he spoke really well. We are dominating patches, but we've got to take those opportunities when we do dominate it. We can dominate games of 4 hours, 5 hours, but if we can't take chances and they get 20-minute spells, 10-minute spells, and they take their chances or hit us on the break or score to 45 seconds. And I know a lot of people like the analogy of the cups of tea review. In the match review, a lot of people found that quite funny, and I said it, and I might have exaggerated slightly, but it was true. We gave 45 seconds. We gave him time to put it down, and it went in the back of the net after 45 seconds. It's just not good enough. But what Sam Long did say really well was we lost concentration, or just didn't really ever have concentration in the first 45 seconds. Got pinned back instantly and couldn't take our chances. So really impressed with what Sam Long said, and also really impressed with Sam Long's performances over the last few games. I think he's done really, really well, and especially in these last 2 as well, which is obviously what we're ranking him on. I think he's done really well. He's come in at centre-back, a place that he hasn't played for quite a long time, and he's just done a very, very good job. Hasn't done anything wrong. I even think going forward as well, he's actually tried to run out of the defence really well as well. Obviously, we know Rob Atkinson can do that, but I think Sam Long's done that as well. He's won a lot of headers for not, I'd say, a tall lad in Sam Long. Really impressed with Sam Long. And yeah, I just like Sam Long. I like Sam Long, and he's been such an important part, an integral part of this Oxford United squad this season. Left back, right back, and now doing a fantastic job at centre back. Who'd have thought it? Second in the ranking show, and he's been playing centre back. Sometimes might not even got the top 10 when he was playing right back at times in his Oxford United career, and now he's second playing at centre back. When the season couldn't get even more strange, but not strange because we clearly know he's got the ability. We knew he was a solid player anyway, but I just didn't think out of all the players we've got. And then again, it sounds like I'm just disrespecting. I'm digging myself a hole here. I apologise, Sam Long, and I apologise to those Sam Long lovers, who I am as well, I guess. But yeah, Sam Long, when you've got the amount of players we've got and the players that can change games offensively, you do sort of tend to normally see, especially Oxford United, who play that attacking game, to see them in the top end. But we're not, and we've got a player like Sam Long, who clearly has proven to be a quality and an important asset to this side in second. Congratulations, Sam Long. You move up 2 places in the ranking show this week, and the biggest jump of them all, from 10th to 1st, is Alex Gorman. Why is he number 10? Why was he first in this in the ranking show? I actually could have maybe done him higher last week, because his performance when he came on and his performance against MK Dons I thought was really, really good. Again, Gorman is so underrated against Charlton. I know we lost the game 2-0, but I think against Charlton, if you watch Gorman, he didn't miss a tackle in the first half, and for the majority of the second half. He was so solid defensively in that defensive midfield role. He always slips in, he looks up, he tries to pass it all the time. He always tries to find that free man, he always tries to split the game up. I like Gorman. I really, really like Gorman. He actually fascinates me as a player, which is, unusual, to be honest with you. But he does, what he does is a sweeping defensive midfielder that is just very, very good. I'm really impressed with Alex Gorman, and that's why he's gone from 10th to 1st. Because even in games where we're losing games in a defensive midfield role, he's a defensive midfielder. When we're losing games 2-0, he's in 1st. Because if you look at him, he actually, he just is a really, really solid player for Oxford United, and it proves when you take him out of it, when you take him out of games. And I won't take him out when he was injured and he's not in the game. You do notice the fact that he's not there, so that's why he's 1st. Gorman was really, really good against Charlton, even when we lost the game 2-0. It's really difficult to sort of take out positives from 2 games like that. But I think Gorman is a positive. I think he did really, really well. Really impressed with him as well. Impressed with everyone in the top 3, Ford, Long, and Gorman. Everyone else, it hasn't been a great week for Oxford United whatsoever. 2 defeats. Of course, we've got Rochdale tomorrow for you, and Tuesday for me. Not because because this is coming out a day later. Not because I'm in another. I don't know what I was going with that. It's a bit of a strange thing to say, but anyway, for you it will be tomorrow because it's coming out on Monday. But for me, I've got 2 days to wait until this game. Will there be a preview for Rochdale here, you ask? I'm not sure. Obviously, if it will be, it's either going to be the same day of the game, which could be an hour before kickoff, or it could be, or it probably won't be a double upload on Monday. So there either will be, and if it is, it will be on Tuesday, the actual day of the game. But there definitely will be a match reaction, and that'll be coming out on Wednesday, the day after. So definitely watch out for that as well. I appreciate it if you're still watching 25 minutes into the podcast. I really do appreciate it. But yes, also one last thing as well, it's the 1st of November, so happy November, 1st of November. If you're still watching this right now, you're still here, and you'll still see that obviously the 1st of November, which means for the podcast and for a good friend of mine, I mentioned it earlier in a few days ago and a few episodes ago, I mentioned that my friend Josh is actually raising money for the Movember charity, of course, a charity that is obviously supporting men, prostate cancer, suicide prevention and lots of other important causes, and a good reason why we should be raising money during November for Movember. Obviously it's just growing a moustache and things like that, and raising money to support the men's side of all of those things I mentioned there. So yeah, definitely going to support that. The link in the description for his donation page will be in the comments down below, so definitely check that out. I think he's currently on £45 with a target of 50, and we've only just started the month, literally the first day of the month. So if you could help him get out there as well, that would be fantastic. Get him to hit his target, that would be fantastic. I'll certainly be donating as the months go on, as this month goes on, and as the days of the month go on. So thank you very much for that as well. Really important cause, and something that we should definitely be taking notice of here on the podcast as well. But anyway, thank you very much for listening to this episode of the podcast. Remember, follow the Instagram page at the Young Fan Podcast as well for all updates on there, and on all social medias, Twitter at Young Fan Podcast, and of course on YouTube. Subscribing is so important if we want to get the live content next year, people. I'd really appreciate it. 60% of you still not subscribed, so if you're one of those 60 and you'd like to see live content or just like what you hear, please consider subscribing. That would be fantastic. Quite a long episode of the podcast today, lots of things to talk about, but anyway, I'll see you later.